They built an empire on lies, and I was the first crack. The crack they tried to bury beneath layers of gold and glittering pretense. I am sitting in the darkness of my bedroom, the blue glow from my laptop screen casting shadows across my face. On the screen, a paused video shows my family gathered around an ornate dining table, champagne glasses raised, smiles frozen in what the world believes is perfect happiness. But I know the truth. I have always known the truth. And tonight, everyone else will know it too. My name is Harper, and this is the story of how I watched my family's carefully constructed facade crumble, piece by piece, until nothing remained but the ugly truth they had spent years concealing. I grew up in Calabasas, in one of those sprawling estates that dot the hills like monuments to excess. Our house was all white marble and floor-to-ceiling windows, with a pool that seemed to spill endlessly into the valley below. My father, Richard, was a commercial real estate developer who had built his fortune buying and flipping properties across Los Angeles County. His success had earned him a spot among the city's elite, a position he guarded more fiercely than anything else in his life. To the outside world, we were the perfect family. Richard and my mother Eleanor attended every charity gala, every golf club dinner, every society event that mattered. They smiled for photographers, gave interviews about family values and the importance of giving back to the community. Eleanor, with her perfectly highlighted hair and designer wardrobe, played the role of devoted wife and mother flawlessly. My older sister Brooke was their golden child, the daughter who had inherited Richard's business acumen and Eleanor's social grace. She was studying business at USC, dating a senator's son, and being groomed to take over a portion of the family empire. And then there was me. I was the quiet one, the one who preferred reading to parties, who studied psychology instead of business, who asked uncomfortable questions about the ethics of some of Richard's deals. I was the imperfection in their perfect picture, the reminder that not everything could be controlled and curated for public consumption. For years, I had accepted my role. I had learned to be invisible at family gatherings, to smile politely when Richard made cutting remarks about my lack of ambition, to ignore the way Eleanor would introduce Brooke to important guests while barely acknowledging my presence. I told myself it did not matter, that I would graduate, move away, and build my own life far from their influence. But then came the night that changed everything. It was supposed to be just another family dinner party, one of the many events my parents hosted to maintain their social standing. The house had been transformed by the event planners Richard hired, every surface gleaming, every flower arrangement perfectly placed. The guest list included some of the wealthiest and most influential people in Los Angeles. There were tech entrepreneurs, entertainment industry executives, a few local politicians, and several of Richard's longtime business associates, including Uncle David and Aunt Susan, who had been friends with my parents since before I was born. I had spent the afternoon helping the caterers set up, staying out of everyone's way as usual. Eleanor had given me a once-over when I emerged in my simple black dress, her lips tightening in that way that meant she disapproved but would not waste words saying so. Brooke, resplendent in a red designer gown that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, had laughed and said something about how I looked like I was going to a funeral instead of a party. The evening began like all the others. Richard held court in the center of the living room, regaling his guests with stories of his latest triumphs. He had just closed a deal on a massive mixed-use development in downtown LA, and he wanted everyone to know about it. His voice boomed across the room as he described the negotiations, embellishing details to make himself sound more clever, more ruthless, more successful. I stood near the windows, nursing a glass of wine, watching the performance. I had seen it countless times before. Richard would talk, the guests would laugh at his jokes and nod at his wisdom, and Eleanor would glide through the crowd making sure everyone felt attended to. Brooke would pose for photos with the younger guests, her Instagram feed carefully curated to show the glamorous life of an heiress in training. When dinner was announced, we all moved to the formal dining room. The table had been set with Eleanor's finest china, the kind that got used maybe 3 times a year. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier overhead, and the centerpiece was an elaborate arrangement of white roses and orchids that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Richard sat at the head of the table, naturally, with Eleanor at the other end. I was seated in the middle, across from Brooke and next to my cousin Daniel, a 19-year-old who spent most of his time glued to his phone, scrolling through social media, and barely participating in conversations. To my other side was Uncle David, Richard's college roommate turned business partner, a man who had grown wealthy alongside my father and shared his views on just about everything. The meal progressed through multiple courses. Servers glided in and out, replacing plates, refilling glasses. Conversation flowed around me, mostly about business, politics, and gossip about people I did not know. I contributed little, responding when directly addressed, but otherwise remaining quiet. This seemed to bother Uncle David. Halfway through the main course, he leaned toward me and said, loud enough for several people to hear, "Harper, you are awfully quiet tonight. Cat got your tongue?" Before I could respond, Richard looked down the table at me, his eyes glinting with something I recognized. It was the look he got when he was about to make someone the target of his humor, when he was going to say something cutting disguised as a joke. "Harper is always quiet," he said, his voice carrying across the room. Conversations died down as people turned to listen. But that is probably for the best. She has always been better as decoration than conversation. A few nervous laughs rippled through the guests. I felt heat rise to my cheeks but kept my expression neutral. This was not new. Richard had been making comments like this for years. But he was not done. He stood up, raising his wine glass as if making a toast. The room fell completely silent. "You know," he continued, "I was just thinking earlier today about what we have built here. This house, this life, this family, and I realized that every good picture needs a frame, something solid and reliable that stays in the background." More laughter, louder this time. Some of the guests were starting to look uncomfortable, but most were still smiling, waiting to see where Richard was going with this. "Harper," he said, looking directly at me now, "you would be so much more useful if you just learned to stay quiet and look pretty. In fact, let me show everyone what I mean." He walked down the length of the table toward me. I watched him approach, my heart beginning to pound. Something in his expression told me this was going to be worse than usual. Eleanor was watching too, her face carefully blank. Brooke had her phone out, probably recording, a small smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. Richard stopped behind my chair. I could feel him looming over me, could smell the expensive cologne he wore and the wine on his breath. The entire room was watching now, dozens of eyes fixed on us. "See," Richard said, placing his hand on the back of my neck. "What Harper fails to understand is that in this family, in this world, you need to know your place. And her place is to be seen, not heard. Actually, you know what? She would be even better as just another piece of table decoration." Before I could react, before I could even process what was happening, Richard's grip tightened on my neck and he slammed my face down into my plate. The impact was shocking, brutal. My forehead hit the china with a crack that seemed to echo through the room. The plate shattered beneath the force, fragments of porcelain scattering across the table. Food smeared across my face, mixing with the blood that immediately began flowing from a cut on my forehead. Pain exploded through my skull, sharp and disorienting. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then someone gasped. A few people laughed, nervous and uncertain. I heard the rapid-fire click of phone cameras, the whispered exclamations of shock. Richard stepped back, surveying his work with satisfaction. "There," he said, his voice filled with dark amusement. "Now she looks like she belongs with the rest of the table setting." The pain was intense, but worse was the humiliation. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, could hear the whispers starting up, could imagine what they were all thinking. Slowly, I lifted my head. Blood dripped from the cut on my forehead, mixing with gravy and mashed potatoes. A shard of broken plate fell from my hair and clinked on the table. I looked around the room, my vision slightly blurred. Eleanor sat at the end of the table, her champagne glass still in her hand, her expression barely changed. If anything, there was a hint of a smile, so small it might have been my imagination. Brooke was definitely smiling, her phone still raised, capturing every moment. Uncle David had turned away, suddenly fascinated by his wine glass. Aunt Susan had tears in her eyes, but she did not move, did not speak. Around the table, most of the guests had their phones out now. Some were taking pictures, some were recording video, some were typing frantically, probably posting to social media already. A few looked genuinely disturbed, but no one stood up. No one came to help me, no one told Richard what he had done was wrong. They all just watched. I looked back at Richard. He was grinning, clearly pleased with himself, basking in the attention. This was what he loved, I realized. The power, the control, the ability to humiliate someone in front of others and have them laugh along with him. "Well," he said, looking around at his guests, "I would say that was a successful demonstration. Now, shall we continue with dinner?" I stood up slowly, carefully. My head throbbed, and I could feel blood dripping down my face, but I did not wipe it away. Instead, I looked at each person in the room, one by one, meeting their eyes. I wanted to remember every face, every expression, every person who had witnessed this, and done nothing. Then, without a word, I turned and walked out of the dining room. Behind me, I heard Richard say something that prompted more laughter, heard the conversation slowly resuming, heard the clink of silverware on china as people went back to their meals. I made it to the bathroom before the tears started. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Blood, food, and smeared makeup covered my face. My dress was ruined. But it was my eyes that shocked me most. They were not filled with tears. Not really. There was something else there, something cold and hard that I had never seen before. Fury. I took out my phone with shaking hands and recorded a short video of myself, making sure to capture the blood, the food in my hair, the stark contrast between the expensive bathroom and the mess on my face. "This is what they call family," I said to the camera, my voice steady despite everything. "This is what they call respect. This is what they call love." And tonight, everyone who witnessed this, everyone who laughed, everyone who stood by and did nothing, they are all going to learn what it really means to be part of Richard's world. I cleaned myself up as best I could, using makeup remover wipes to clear away the worst of it. The cut on my forehead was not deep, but it would leave a mark. Good. I wanted to remember this night. As I was fixing my makeup, I heard a knock on the door. Harper? It was Daniel's voice, uncertain and young. Are you okay? I opened the door. My cousin stood there, phone in hand, looking genuinely worried. That was really messed up, he said. I cannot believe he did that. Did you record it? I asked. He blinked, surprised by the question. Yeah, everyone did. It was crazy. Can you send it to me? I kept my voice casual, friendly. For memories later. Something to laugh about. Daniel hesitated for just a moment, then shrugged. Sure, I guess. Though I do not know why you would want to remember that. He tapped on his phone, and a few seconds later, mine buzzed with the incoming video file. Thanks, I said. Could you do me a favor and not mention this to anyone? I do not want my parents to know I am collecting the videos. Sure, whatever, he said, already losing interest, his attention drifting back to his screen. I went back to my room, my mind racing. If Daniel had recorded it, others had too. All those phones, all those cameras. And I knew my family, knew the people in their circle. They documented everything, shared everything. Desperate to show the world how glamorous their lives were. They had just documented their own downfall, and they did not even know it. Over the next week, I moved carefully, strategically. The cut on my forehead scabbed over, a constant reminder every time I looked in the mirror. Richard and Eleanor acted as if nothing had happened. At breakfast the next morning, Richard had actually seemed cheerful, probably still riding the high of his performance. Eleanor asked if I had enjoyed the party, her tone suggesting that there was a correct answer and an incorrect one. I played along. I smiled and said it had been lovely. I thanked her for including me. I asked Brooke about her dress, where she had gotten it, how much it cost. I was the perfect daughter, quiet and accommodating, everything they had always wanted me to be. And while I played my part, I was working. I started with Aunt Susan. I found her at the country club a few days later, sitting by the pool with some of her friends. I approached hesitantly, putting on my most vulnerable expression. Aunt Susan, I said softly, could I talk to you for a moment? She looked uncomfortable, probably remembering the dinner party, but she nodded and followed me to a quieter corner. I wanted to apologize if I caused any awkwardness the other night, I said. I know Dad was just joking around, and I probably should have handled it better. Oh, Harper, she said, relief evident in her voice. She had been worried I would make a scene, I realized. It is all right, dear. Your father, he just has a unique sense of humor. I know, I said, laughing lightly. Actually, I was thinking of making a little memory video of the party. Just for the family. Did you happen to take any videos that night? I would love to include some different angles. Oh, well, yes, I think I did take a few clips, she said. Let me check. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her photos. Yes, here, I have a few. Would you like me to send them to you? That would be wonderful, I said. I want to capture the whole evening, all the moments. She sent me 3 videos. The longest was nearly 2 minutes, showing the entire incident from her angle at the table. The quality was excellent, her new iPhone capturing every detail in crisp, clear video. I thanked her profusely and moved on to my next target. Uncle David was trickier. He had seemed embarrassed by what happened, turning away during the worst of it. But he was Richard's business partner, loyal to a fault. I caught him at his office, showing up unexpectedly with coffee and pastries from his favorite bakery. Harper, he said, surprised to see me. Is everything all right? Everything is fine, I assured him. I just wanted to thank you for coming to the party. I know how busy you are. We chatted for a while about nothing important. Then, casually, I mentioned, Mom was saying she wanted to put together a video compilation of the party for Dad's birthday next month. I am helping her collect footage. I know you usually record things at parties. Did you get any good clips? He shifted in his chair, uncomfortable. Harper, I'm not sure that is a good idea. Some of what happened that night was not exactly appropriate for a birthday video. Oh, I know, I said quickly. We will edit out the embarrassing parts, obviously. But Mom really wants to do something special, and you know how Dad is about his birthday. If we do not have enough footage, he will be disappointed. The mention of disappointing Richard did the trick. Uncle David pulled out his tablet and showed me what he had recorded. There were several clips, including one that showed Richard walking toward me, the anticipation in the room, and then the moment of impact from a side angle that showed both Richard's face and mine. Could you send these to me? I asked. I will make sure to only use the appropriate parts. He agreed, more out of resignation than enthusiasm. I collected videos from 7 different people over the course of 2 weeks. Some, like Daniel and Aunt Susan, were easy. Others required more effort, more manipulation. I had to convince Uncle David's wife that I needed footage for a school project about family dynamics. I had to tell one of Richard's business associates that I was creating a surprise video for my mother's birthday. I had to promise Brooke's boyfriend that I would include clips of Brooke looking beautiful if he would share his footage. Each lie came easier than the last. By the end, I had nearly a dozen different angles of that night, plus additional footage from previous parties and gatherings. I had videos of Richard belittling me at a golf club dinner 6 months earlier. I had a clip of Eleanor telling Aunt Susan that they did not expect much from me, that I was not as bright as Brooke. I had footage of Richard pushing me into the pool during a party last summer, Brooke's laughter loud in the background as I struggled in my evening gown. I had years of small cruelties, documented by people who thought they were just capturing fun memories. Now came the hard part. I locked myself in my room, telling Eleanor I had a big project due for school. She barely acknowledged this, too busy planning her next charity luncheon. I spent 3 days editing. I was not a professional, but I had learned enough from YouTube tutorials and online courses to put together something coherent. I started with a montage of our family at various events, all smiles and perfection. Photos of Richard and Eleanor at charity galas, pictures of our family at the country club, clips of Richard giving interviews about family values and success. I used uplifting music, the kind that suggested warmth and love and connection. Then I added text over the images: the perfect family, the American dream, love, respect, and success. The music shifted, becoming discordant, ominous. The happy family photos faded away, replaced by the footage from the dinner party. I showed it from multiple angles, cutting between different perspectives. The initial moment when Uncle David commented on my silence, Richard's face as he started his speech, the cruel glint in his eyes. The walk down the table, the hand on my neck. And then the impact, shown from 3 different angles simultaneously, the sound of the plate breaking amplified, slowed down so every detail was visible. I cut to Eleanor's face, zooming in on that hint of a smile, to Brooke laughing and filming, to the guests with their phones out, documenting rather than helping, to Uncle David looking away. To Aunt Susan crying but staying silent, I added text again. This is their love. This is their respect. This is their family. Then I included the earlier footage, Richard pushing me into the pool, superimposed with an interview clip of him talking about treating everyone with dignity. Eleanor's comment about not expecting much from me contrasted with photos of her accepting a Mother of the Year award from her charity organization. Brooke mocking my clothes, my major, my choices, intercut with her Instagram posts about female empowerment and supporting other women. The video ended with the clip I had taken in the bathroom, my bloodied face staring into the camera. This is what they call family, my voice said, and tonight, you are going to learn what that really means. Final text appeared. The Gilded Scar, a true story. I watched it through a dozen times, making small adjustments, perfecting the timing. It was 23 minutes long, too long for social media, but perfect for what I had planned. The quality was good, the message was clear, and the impact was devastating. Now I just needed the right moment to deploy it. That moment came 2 weeks later. Richard and Eleanor announced they were hosting a viewing party for the family gala footage at the Ritz-Carlton downtown. It was supposed to be a celebration, a chance for Richard to show off to an even bigger audience. The guest list included not just family friends, but business partners, potential investors, and even a few local politicians Richard had been courting. It was perfect. I volunteered to help with the technical setup, offering to handle the video presentation since I had been studying media production in school. Eleanor seemed surprised by my initiative but pleased. Richard barely acknowledged my offer, too focused on making sure the right people would be there. The night of the event, I arrived early. The hotel had provided a large conference room with stadium seating, a professional projection system, and excellent acoustics. I met with the technical staff, explaining that I had the video file ready to go. I showed them a USB drive, the one Richard had prepared with his carefully curated highlights reel. What I did not show them was the second USB drive in my bag, identical to the first. As guests began arriving, I stayed near the projection booth, chatting with the technician, making sure I understood how everything worked. The room filled quickly. I saw Uncle David and Aunt Susan, several of Richard's business partners, some people I recognized from news programs and society pages, and dozens of others I did not know but who clearly knew my father. Richard stood near the front, shaking hands, laughing too loudly, soaking up the attention. Eleanor worked the room with practiced grace, air-kissing and complimenting and making everyone feel important. Brooke held court among the younger crowd, her designer outfit and perfect makeup drawing appreciative looks and envious glances. I waited until 5 minutes before the scheduled start time. Then, while the technician was distracted by a question from hotel staff, I made the switch. Richard's USB drive went into my bag. My drive went into the computer. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone must be able to hear it. But my hands were steady as I loaded the file, double-checked that it was ready to play, and nodded to the technician that we were good to go. The lights dimmed. Conversations died down. Everyone found their seats. Richard stood at the front of the room, Eleanor beside him, both of them smiling like they had just won the lottery. "Thank you all for coming," Richard began, his voice projecting across the room with the confidence of someone who had never been challenged. "Tonight is a celebration of family, of success, of the values that have guided us to where we are today. My beautiful wife Eleanor and I wanted to share with you some highlights from our recent family gathering, a night that truly exemplified what we are all about." He gestured to the screen. "So please, sit back, enjoy, and witness what it means to be part of something truly special." The video began. For the first minute, it was exactly what everyone expected. Happy family photos, glowing testimonials, clips of Richard and Eleanor at various prestigious events. The audience murmured appreciatively. I could see Richard's chest puffing with pride. Then the music changed. A few people noticed immediately, shifting in their seats. The happy images faded to black. When the picture returned, it showed the dinner party, multiple camera angles showing the table, the guests, and Richard beginning his walk toward where I Saturday. The audience grew quiet, confused. This was not what they had expected. Then they watched as Richard grabbed my neck and slammed my face into the plate. The sound of the plate breaking echoed through the conference room speakers, amplified, impossible to ignore. Gasps rippled through the audience. I heard someone say, "Oh my God." The video did not stop. It showed the impact from multiple angles, again and again, making it impossible to claim it was an accident or a misunderstanding. It showed Eleanor's smile, Brooke's laughter, the guests with their phones. It showed the blood on my face, the food in my hair, the broken plate. I watched Richard's face instead of the screen. I watched as realization dawned, as his expression shifted from confusion to horror. Eleanor had gone pale, her champagne glass trembling in her hand. Brooke was staring at me, her mouth open, recognition and fear warring in her eyes. The video continued. Older footage played, showing other incidents, other humiliations. Richard pushing me into the pool, Eleanor's cutting remarks, years of small cruelties compiled into an undeniable pattern of abuse. People were standing now, some moving toward the exits, others staring at the screen in shock. I heard angry whispers, saw people pulling out their phones to record the video playing on the screen. "Turn it off!" Richard shouted, his voice cracking. "There has been a mistake. Turn it off now." But the technician was frozen, staring at the screen like everyone else. And the video kept playing. When my bloodied face appeared at the end, delivering my final message, the room was utterly silent. No one moved, no one spoke, they just watched. The screen went black, the lights came up. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then things began to happen very quickly. Mr. Harding, one of Richard's biggest investors, stood up. He looked at Richard with undisguised disgust. "I think I have seen quite enough," he said, his voice carrying across the silent room. "Robert, Henry, I believe we should go." He walked out, and several other men in expensive suits followed. I recognized them as partners in Richard's latest development deal. Aunt Susan was crying openly now. Uncle David had his arm around her, but he was staring at Richard with an expression I could not quite read. Betrayal, maybe, or perhaps relief that the truth was finally out. One of the local politicians, a woman I had seen on the news, stood up and addressed the room. "I want to make it clear that I had no knowledge of this situation. I came here tonight expecting a celebration, not to witness evidence of domestic abuse. I will not be associating myself with this family or its business ventures." More people stood. Some left immediately. Others pulled out phones, some calling lawyers, some undoubtedly sharing what they had just seen with everyone in their contact lists. Richard tried to regain control. "This is a misunderstanding," he said, his voice desperate. "That video was edited, taken out of context. My daughter, she has issues, mental health problems. She is trying to sabotage me." But no one was listening. The exodus had begun, and nothing Richard said could stop it. I stood up from my seat in the back row. Several people near me moved away, as if I might be dangerous. But I was not looking at them. I was looking at Richard. Our eyes met across the room. In that moment, I saw something I had never seen before in my father's face: fear. I picked up my bag and walked toward the exit. As I passed Richard and Eleanor, I stopped. "You wanted me to know my place," I said quietly, so only they could hear. "You wanted me to be decoration, to stay quiet, to not make waves." Well, I stayed quiet while I gathered every piece of evidence. I was very decorative while I edited it all together. And I have been absolutely silent while I planned how to show the world who you really are. Eleanor started to say something, but I kept walking. Behind me, I heard Brooke's voice, shrill and panicked. "Harper, what did you do? Do you know what you have done to us?" I stopped at the door and looked back one last time. The room that had been full of Los Angeles' elite was now half empty and emptying fast. Richard stood alone at the front, his perfect composure shattered. Eleanor had sunk into a chair, her face buried in her hands. Brooke was crying, her perfect makeup running down her face. "I know exactly what I did," I said. I told the truth. I walked out into the Los Angeles night. The air was warm, carrying the smell of jasmine from the hotel gardens. I could hear traffic from the street, the distant sound of music from somewhere nearby. Normal city sounds, ordinary and unremarkable. I pulled out my phone and looked at it for a moment. Then I deleted every file related to the video project. The raw footage, the editing projects, the final cut, everything. I did not need them anymore. The video had been shown, recorded by dozens of people in that room. It would spread on its own now, shared and reshared, discussed and dissected. My work was done. A text came through from Daniel. "Holy shit, Harper. That was insane. Are you okay?" I typed back, "I am better than okay." Another text, from Aunt Susan. "We should have stopped him. I am so sorry. Please let me know if you need anything." I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me wanted to be angry at her, at all of them, for their silence, for their complicity. But another part of me understood. They had been trapped too, in their own ways, by the social system Richard represented, by the fear of losing their place in that world. I typed back, "Thank you. I will be fine." I started walking, not sure where I was going, just knowing I needed to move. My phone kept buzzing with messages, some from people offering support, some from reporters who had somehow already gotten my number, asking for interviews, some from numbers I did not recognize, probably friends of the family trying to get the story or tell me I had made a terrible mistake. I turned my phone off. The next few days were chaos. The video went viral, just as I had known it would. It was shared millions of times across social media platforms, dissected by news outlets, discussed on talk shows. Richard's business partners officially severed ties with him. 3 of his biggest development projects were put on hold as investors pulled out. Eleanor's charity organizations quietly removed her from their boards. Brooke's Instagram, once filled with sponsored content and brand partnerships, went dark as companies scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. I moved out of the house that same night, staying with a friend from school whose family asked no questions and simply made room for me. I applied for emergency financial aid at my university, explaining that I was no longer receiving family support. I got a job at a bookstore near campus, something simple and quiet that let me think. The legal threats came quickly. Richard hired lawyers who sent me letters claiming defamation, emotional distress, unauthorized use of private footage. But the lawyers I consulted, through a legal aid clinic at my university, told me I had nothing to worry about. The footage was real, unedited in any meaningful way, and documented actual events. Truth was an absolute defense against defamation. Moreover, several of the people who had attended that dinner party were coming forward now, giving statements to journalists, some even apologizing publicly for their inaction. The narrative had shifted. I was not a vengeful daughter destroying her family out of spite. I was a survivor exposing abuse. Richard and Eleanor tried to control the story. Giving interviews where they claimed I was troubled had always been difficult, was estranged from reality, but their attempts only made things worse. Video evidence was hard to argue against, and the court of public opinion had already reached its verdict. 6 weeks after that night at the Ritz-Carlton, I sat in my tiny apartment near campus, a place I was renting with money from my bookstore job and my financial aid. It was not much, just a studio with a Murphy bed and a kitchenette barely big enough to turn around in. But it was mine. My phone rang. I had gotten a new number, but a few people had it. I checked the screen. It was Aunt Susan. I answered hesitantly. "Hello?" "Harper," she said, and her voice was thick with emotion. "I just wanted you to know that David and I are filing for divorce." I was surprised. I did not know there were problems. "There were not," she said. "Or rather, there were, but I had convinced myself they were not important. But watching what happened to you, seeing how many of us just stood by, I realized I have been standing by my whole life. David has been Richard's enabler for years, defending him, making excuses. And I have been enabling David. I am done with that. I am 62 years old, and I am done pretending." "I am sorry," I said, though I was not sure if I meant it. "Do not be," she said. "You did something brave, Harper. You showed me what courage looks like. I should be thanking you." After we hung up, I sat by my window, looking out at the street below. Students walked by, going about their normal lives, worried about exams and relationships and job prospects. Ordinary concerns that suddenly felt precious. My therapy sessions were helping. My university provided counseling services, and I had been going twice a week, working through years of psychological abuse, learning to recognize the patterns, to understand that none of it had been my fault. It was slow work, painful work, but necessary. I had also started writing, not about revenge or trauma, but about recovery. about what it means to rebuild yourself when everything you thought was solid turns out to be a facade. My psychology professors were encouraging, suggesting I might have material for a thesis, maybe even a book someday, but I was not ready for that yet. For now, I just needed to exist, to breathe, to learn who I was without the weight of my family's expectations and abuse pressing down on me. 3 months after the video, I was leaving my psychology class when I saw Eleanor waiting by the campus entrance. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Her designer clothes seemed too big on her, and there were lines around her mouth that I had never noticed before. "Harper," she said as I approached. "Please, just 5 minutes." I considered walking past her, but curiosity won out. "What do you want?" "To apologize," she said. "Not to make excuses, not to ask for forgiveness, just to say I am sorry. What we did to you, what we allowed to happen, it was wrong. I was wrong." "Yes, you were. I know you probably will not believe this," she continued, "but I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought that maintaining our position, our status, was what mattered. I thought if we could just look perfect enough, be successful enough, then everything else would fall into place. I sacrificed you for that illusion, and I will regret it for the rest of my life." "You are right," I said. "I do not believe you." She flinched but nodded. "I understand. I just wanted you to know that I am getting help, real help, not just trying to manage the fallout. Therapy, groups for enablers of abuse. I filed for divorce from Richard last week." That surprised me. "Does he know?" "He does now. He is not taking it well. But Harper, he never took anything well that did not go exactly his way." She paused, looking at me with something that might have been actual emotion. "You were right to do what you did. I hate that it came to that, but you were right." I did not know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to yell at her, to list every moment she could have intervened and chose not to. But another part of me just felt tired. "I hope therapy helps you," I said finally. "I really do. But I do not think we will have a relationship again. Maybe ever." "I know," she said quietly. "I just wanted you to know that I see you now, really see you, and I am so sorry it took something like this for me to open my eyes." She walked away, and I watched her go. I did not feel satisfaction or closure. I felt sad, in a distant kind of way, sad for the family we could have been if things had been different. But things were not different. They were exactly what they were, and I had survived them. Life moved on. The media attention eventually faded, replaced by newer scandals and fresher dramas. Richard's business continued to collapse, and I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was facing several lawsuits from former partners claiming fraud and misrepresentation. Brooke had dropped out of USC and moved to New York, trying to reinvent herself away from the scandal. As for me, I graduated with honors in psychology, focusing my thesis on family dynamics and the psychology of abuse in affluent families. I was accepted into a graduate program with a full scholarship. I made new friends, people who knew me as Harper the student and barista, not Harper from that viral video. Sometimes people recognized me. The video was still out there, still being shared, still being discussed in think pieces about family dynamics and social media justice. But it was becoming just another part of internet history, something people vaguely remembered rather than actively discussed. I started dating someone I met at a coffee shop, a kind person who asked about my day and listened when I talked about my classes. When I finally told them about my family, about everything that had happened, they held my hand and said, "That must have been so hard. I am glad you are free now." And I was. Free, not unmarked, not unscathed. I still had nightmares sometimes, still found myself flinching at raised voices, still struggled with trusting people completely. The scar on my forehead had faded, but would never disappear entirely, a thin white line that I saw every time I looked in the mirror, but I was building something new. Something that was mine, built on my own terms, without the weight of anyone else's expectations or abuse. I was learning what it meant to have healthy relationships, to set boundaries, to value myself. The gilded scar would always be part of my story. But it was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of the real one, the one where I got to decide who I wanted to be. On the 1-year anniversary of that night at the Ritz-Carlton, I took myself to the beach. I sat on the sand as the sun set over the Pacific, watching the waves roll in, constant and powerful. I thought about everything that had led me to this moment, every choice, every consequence. I thought about Richard, who had built his life on the appearance of perfection and watched it crumble when the truth came to light. I thought about Eleanor, who had sacrificed her integrity for social standing and was now trying to find it again. I thought about Brooke, who had been raised to value image over substance and was now paying the price. And I thought about myself, about the girl who had been pushed down, humiliated, and dismissed. About the woman who had decided that the truth mattered more than family loyalty, that justice mattered more than keeping the peace. I pulled out my phone and looked at a message I had received earlier that day. It was from a women's advocacy group, asking if I would be willing to speak at their conference about surviving family abuse. They said my story had inspired others to come forward, to seek help, to refuse to accept abuse as normal. I typed back, yes, I would be honored. The waves kept rolling in, and I kept watching them. The sun disappeared below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and deep blue. The temperature dropped, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. Somewhere in Los Angeles, in a house I no longer called home, my family was dealing with the consequences of their actions. Somewhere in the vast network of the internet, the video I had created was still circulating, still sparking conversations about family, abuse, and the price of silence. But here, on this beach, with the salt air in my lungs and the sound of the ocean in my ears, I was just Harper, not the victim, not the viral sensation, not the daughter who destroyed her family. Just Harper, a woman who had survived, who had fought back, who had chosen herself. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I realized that was more than enough. I stood up, brushed the sand off my jeans, and walked back toward my car. Tomorrow I had class, work at the bookstore, and a therapy session. Normal things, building block things. The gilded scar would always be part of me, a reminder of where I had been and what I had survived. But it did not define me. It was just one chapter in a story I was still writing, one that I hoped would have many more chapters filled with growth, healing, and genuine connection. As I drove home through the Los Angeles traffic, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. The scar on my forehead was barely visible in the dim light, but I knew it was there, and I smiled. Because that scar was proof that I had survived, proof that I had fought back, proof that even when everything seems designed to keep you silent and small, you can choose to be loud and fierce and free. The gilded empire my family had built on lies and abuse had crumbled, and from its ruins, I was building something real.